You are listening to a National Screen Institute podcast, direct from Canada's National Training School for writers, directors and producers in film, television and digital media.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Binning, reporting for the National Screen Institute. Through our podcasts, we hope you'll learn more about the film, TV and digital media industries. You can subscribe for free to our weekly podcast using iTunes, and there are more great video and audio interviews at nsi-canada.ca. If you want to comment on this podcast, visit our website or email podcast@nsi-canada.ca or call NSI toll-free at 1-800-952-9307 and leave a message on our podcast hotline. It may bring back horrible memories of your youth, but it also promises lots of laughs. House Party is a new comedy network series produced by National Screen Institute alumni Kyle Bornais and Brennan Sawatsky. The show follows the crazy course of events that unfold when a university student decides to invite a few people over while his parents are away. In the first of this three-part interview, I speak with producer Kyle Bornais about the origins of House Party. So, Kyle, first of all, I wanted to get a better idea of what House Party is all about. How would you describe the show?
Well, essentially, House Party is it's a party. The whole season is one solid party going from 6 p.m. till 6 a.m., but each episode is seen through the eyes of a different character. So, in one episode, you'll hear snippets of a conversation as you're, walking, as the cameras are going through rooms with the characters we're focusing on. And then, 2 episodes later, you might hear the rest of that conversation that you heard snippets from, and, it may be about something completely different than you thought it was about. It may be exactly what you thought it was about. It's kind of as if, the plan is we're kind of taking the viewer to that party, and they're tagging along with a different character every episode as they tune in.
That's a really kind of neat idea. It's very unique. Can you tell me how the original idea first came about?
Yeah, I'd love to say it was all mine and I was totally involved in it, but that would be a complete lie. This happened in 2005. I guess Matt Kippen and Sarah Constable, the creators of the show and the writers on the show, had pitched a show to Rob Hardy at CTV. And, he liked it and thought it was interesting, so he sent it over to the Comedy Network, who then agreed with him and had a couple phone calls with Matt and Sarah. And the decision there was that they wanted to move into development, but then Matt and Sarah needed to find a producer. So Matt and Sarah went out interviewing producers, which is a very different way of the typical way of getting Canadian television off the ground. But that's exactly what happened. I met them over a beer and thought it went well, and then about a few days later, they called me up and said that they wanted me to option the show from them and have Farpoint produce it. So I said sure, and years later we did the series.
Well, that's kind of neat, yeah, that they kind of went around and chose you as opposed to typically maybe how this might work.
Exactly, it was kind of nice. It was like getting a show, a development deal handed to me, which is very different than I'm used to. I'm the one usually out there fighting to try to get them, so it was a nice change.
So what happened once Matt and Sarah and you decided that you were all working together? What happened in terms of developing the show from there once you had your team?
I guess I went back to the network and said, you're stuck with me. And, Sarah, I guess it was, it's Karen Swerdviger and Michelle Daly over at the network, said, well, okay, I guess we'll work with Kyle. Mm-hmm. And I optioned the show, and the idea then was to develop a mini Bible and 2 first draft scripts. So that would have been the Adam episode and the Eric episode. Adam being our protagonist and the guy who owns the house. Well, his parents own the house, and he's house sitting. And then Eric, his best friend from high school. So we started to develop those initial 2 scripts probably in November, December of 2005, with plans to deliver, I think it was February. So we delivered the scripts back and forth with the network and with our story editor at the time, Ian Johnson, and managed to come up with a Bible or a mini Bible that we all liked, and 2 scripts that we all thought were pretty strong. And we went forward there, and then we didn't hear anything from the network for the longest time, and didn't really know what was going on. And then I got a phone call saying that they wanted to go to pilot. So at that point, we then took the 2 scripts, and we knew that because of the nature of the show, it was only going to be a demonstration pilot because, with every episode taking place at the same location, we couldn't exactly shoot a pilot and then come back, 2 years later or a year later and shoot the series. So, we knew right away we were doing a demonstration pilot, so we thought, let's make it as strong as possible. So we went into another phase of writing, and Matt and Sarah took the best elements from the 2 scripts that they had written and created the initial pilot script that we did. And we shot that in July of 2006. I probably should actually mention that the pilot that we shot, that was at the point that I brought Brendan Sawatsky on board. Because I had a background in television but not drama, and he had a background in drama but not television. And I just thought that, I shouldn't produce this by myself, seeing as I didn't know drama that well. So I called up Brendan, who had been an old friend of mine for years, and asked him if he was interested in coming on board and producing the pilot with me. And luckily he said yes, so we produced it together.
Now, can you tell me about the idea of doing a pilot which you know isn't going to air? Was that kind of an odd thing? Was it difficult, or do you think overall that forced you to sort of think of the show in a different way, and it did some good things to the overall concept?
I would say it was great. And initially I thought it was kind of odd because, the network gave us a lot of money to shoot something that really no one was going to see but the network and our close friends. But what it did allow, you felt kind of like you had a lot more freedom. We weren't worried about the cost of licensing music. We weren't worried about licensing, everything for the show, clearing things for the show. We just tried to make the best show possible. And by doing that, it allowed us to really see what worked and what didn't without having to worry about whether or not it would work on air and whether or not we could even show it. So it was a huge amount of freedom that you don't normally get when you're producing television. It was as if we were making a short film just for our friends to see, but we had, almost $500,000 to do it.
So where did you put most of that money into? Was it wanting to get the sets right and the actors, or what's the important parts when you're doing a pilot like that?
The casting and the script. The sets we shot in a house, and I wouldn't do that again. We definitely didn't do that for the series. We actually shot on location, which was kind of one of those things we learned from the pilot was a mistake. Don't do that. We needed more freedom. We needed more ability to move the walls and to get in where we wanted to. And the art department needed more freedom in terms of what they were going to make the show look like. I think a lot of that money went into, a lot of it did go into the look of the show and how we wanted the show to look. So, we shot on Super 16 instead of HD, even though everybody kept telling us, HD is cheaper. This type of show, we really wanted to have kind of a cinematic look. So that, by giving us enough money to shoot the demonstration pilot on 16, it really allowed us to go, okay, this is the look of the show, this is what we want to go for. And I think that really helped sell the show. I obviously wasn't in the room with the network when they decided to greenlight it, but I had heard that the look of the show was a big selling point. And then the comedy of the show, because we were able to cast really good comedic actors, and we were able to spend the time reworking the script and taking the best elements out of 2 scripts to turn it into one. Spend the time and the money to do that. It really it allowed us to go with our best foot forward.
That was Kyle Bornais of Winnipegs Farpoint Films discussing the development and piloting of House Party. If you haven't checked out the new show yet, it airs Wednesday nights on the Comedy Network at 10 p.m. Eastern and Pacific times. And watch for part 2 of this interview on the NSI website.
Remember, you can subscribe for free to our weekly podcast using iTunes, and there are more great video and audio interviews at nsi-canada.ca. If you want to comment on this podcast, visit our website or email podcast@nsi-canada.ca or call NSI toll-free at 1-800-952-9307 and leave a message on our podcast hotline. Thanks for listening. I'm Cheryl Binning, reporting for the National Screen Institute.
You've been listening to a National Screen Institute podcast, direct from Canada's National Training School for Writers, Directors and Producers in Film, Television and Digital Media.